Nomad Podcast.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Nomad Podcast. And today, I'm actually sweaty. Today I have the wonderful Jordan Walker joining me, and it was such a pleasure, or will be such a pleasure, of having him. And topic of today will mainly be his journey into Bitcoin, the idea behind the Bitcoin Collective, a thing that Jordan founded by himself. They do some amazing work in the education space in the Bitcoin community, and recent related news about Apple, how they just openly opened backdoors for the UK government to use if they have a warrant and if they think you're a criminal. So we will mainly be talking about this, but I don't want to spoil too much, so let's get right to the episode, shall we? So, hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Nomad Podcast. And today I have the wonderful Jordan Walker joining me. And Jordan, I normally start the episodes on our podcast with people sharing their rabbit hole stories. So, would you like to do that? How did you get into Bitcoin? Who inspired you to get into Bitcoin? And general thoughts when you first got into Bitcoin?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me on. It's very good to chat. And I will start in about 2017 is when I started I will say crypto as a whole, because I went down the crypto rabbit hole, first, as I think a lot of people do, is you see the shiny objects and you're like, okay, well, I can make money here. And so that pulled me in. And 2017, I was loving it, putting my money in God knows what. I don't know what. There were so many different cryptocurrencies that you just you don't even know anything about them, and you just put money into them. And in hindsight, it's a very silly thing to do, and I'm trying now to make people avoid doing that. But you get to 2018, there's a massive crash, the start of 2018, in the whole market. And that kind of puts me off because I hadn't really gone down the rabbit hole and learned about what this is. It was more just an investment. So fast forward to 2020, I started to get interested because the price is going up again. And at this point, I was still into crypto. And I started a podcast called The Crypto Standard. And it was just as I was educating myself, to essentially record that and share that with the world. And I was doing it with my brother-in-law. So we were just exploring this industry, and then you can see a shift happening. And you're like, why are we talking about all of these other cryptocurrencies, but we want to just talk about Bitcoin? But where do they fit in, all these other cryptocurrencies? So we quite suddenly we were just like, no, this is a waste of time. We need to just be talking about Bitcoin, concentrating on Bitcoin. I was reading a lot more around Bitcoin and realizing what this thing actually is. So on the podcast, we were always talking about America. They're doing this, they're doing that. So I'm based in the UK, like yourself, and we like to say we had a fuck it moment, and we were like, let's put on a conference in the UK, and actually get something going here. So we put a message out to the usual suspects, like your Jeff Booth, Larry Lepard, Greg Foss, Nat Brunel. And we said, if we did this, could you come? And all of them, they were just like, yeah, we will come. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And it turns into be the UK's first major Bitcoin conference in 2022, or the end of 2022. And by this point, I'm deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And that was the formation of my company now, which is the Bitcoin Collective. And I'm trying to think what was the trigger point for me actually realizing it was Bitcoin over crypto. And have you ever read the book, The Fourth Turning?
Yeah. It says something. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, so it's actually not a Bitcoin book. And but this is what Orange pilled me. It was what it does is it looks at the cycles that we go through as a society.
Ah, yeah.
And yeah, and it makes you zoom out. And that's what I needed. I needed a zoomed out picture of the cycles that we've actually been going through. And this is kind of rhyming what's going on here. So by that, just reading that book, and actually then it kind of pulled me into like looking at history and what has happened previously and what could happen in the future. And that's where I was like, all right, Bitcoin's the only one that's going to last this. And that really pulled me into Bitcoin. I've been, yeah, just sounding the Bitcoin alarm in the UK ever since.
Yeah, cool. I mean, talking about cycles, isn't it funny that always after a war, there has been like a new monetary system? I mean, after World War One, there was a new system. After World War Two, there came a new system. And funny enough, in my opinion, when the Fed was created, we had world wars. I mean, we had wars before that, right? It's not like we didn't have wars never on this planet. We always had wars, but especially those new wars with guns and weapons. That was like, or those horrible wars with like gas and all that. That came all after the Fed was created. So, and I find it funny, like after like, because currently we're like at the end of a cycle, you know, like after 8 years, the cycle comes to
Mhm,
an end and then something new happens and some new system gets created. And like for me, the new system is Bitcoin in a sense, or
mhm.
generally like those all those cryptocurrencies. Sorry for saying like that, but for all the crypto pros out there. But it's really interesting once you get into history and look like, ah, yeah, Fed was created, World War One, World War Two. Then after that came like more wars and more crises. I mean, 1971 gold standard was abolished, and after that, like housing prices went up, and it's just like a huge, how should I call it, mind fuck, if you want to say so. Like once you step out of the, oh gosh, I'm getting amputated here. Matrix, you know, once you step out of the matrix and see everything is shit. And but yeah, you mentioned the Bitcoin collective at the end of your story, and basically my question now is, what do you guys exactly do? Because you briefly shared how it got into place. If you want to share something more on that, like detail wise, but how, like, what do you guys do exactly? Because in my opinion, I think you do some great work, and I have been at some events that you guys um had, you know, and I always ask myself, what is it exactly what you do? Like, you know, are you orange paying guys through events, newsletters, or just briefly, what do you do, guys?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of the work that we do is behind the scenes, essentially. We'll be,
Matrix.
yeah, and like connecting dots, talking to people, behind the scene that can actually make a difference. But then
Mhm.
on the front side, we've got the media side of things of like, we've got our podcast, our newsletter. We run events, although running large scale events in the UK now is increasingly more difficult, unfortunately, which is painful because I would like to run more large scale events.
Yeah,
But a lot of companies that are focusing on Bitcoin aren't actually coming to the UK. Just because of the landscape where we currently are. And to run any large scale events, you need these companies. You want to collaborate with them. You need that sponsorship. So we haven't ran any large scale events since 22, but we've been doing a lot of more smaller niche events. And now we're seeing a big trend with Bitcoin or businesses that are looking to develop a Bitcoin strategy in the UK. And that's kind of been spearheaded by what Michael Saylor's been doing with MicroStrategy. You're now seeing corporate treasuries pop up everywhere around the world. Of how can we acquire some Bitcoin and hold this on our balance sheet? And we are seeing a similar trend in the UK, but more on a SME, so small to medium enterprise level. So we're working with a few of these to develop a strategy behind the scenes, and then also me being Scottish, I'll go into I'm hoping to push forward the education, the talk around Bitcoin in Scotland. So I'll be presenting to a team in Scottish Parliament around Bitcoin, and yet to see how that's going to land.
Okay, cool. So you would say you're like a Braveheart 2.0 then, like Mel Gibson blue face color like on his face, you know. So but yeah, is it
Maybe I
then
should
like
do.
yeah, go on, sorry.
I was going to say maybe I should do that in the presentation.
Oh
I'll
yeah,
just
like with
paint my face. Yeah.
like with you know the kilt and then with a cock back and then like one like in one hand like a Bitcoin, you know, like those coins that I sometimes sell you at the conference, and then the other hand like a Scotch egg, you know, and then, oh my god,
I
I can
love
just
that you. I love that you just called it a cock bag as well.
yeah, God. But that's what they call it, a cock bag, like that hairy bag that you have like on your waist. So but how is it like with the regulators then in the UK, especially like adopting Bitcoin? Are they friendly or are they like not so friendly, or are they like, yeah, well, you can, but here are like certain laws that you have to follow, like data wise or sharing data with the government who owns Bitcoin? You know, how is it like reg- regulatorily wise? Is that even the
Yeah,
word? But
regulatory wise, that's quite a mouthful.
regulatory wise. But how is
uh,
it in the UK with that?
it's when we're talking about Bitcoin,
Hmm.
and let's just group digital assets because they group it as digital assets in
Mm.
general. Um, Very similar to how the US done it,
Okay.
or are doing it, but it's not. We're notoriously not friendly towards that industry, um, and it's difficult. We actually we hosted a X Spaces last night, and it was talking all about this, and it was getting some people from the financial industry, people that have launched ETFs in Europe, Bitcoin ETFs in Europe, to actually explain what is the reception of the FCA. So the FCA is the UK's Financial Conduct Authority. They're the regulators. And interestingly, it was a brick wall, is how they described it. They just didn't want to have that conversation around it, and almost, just shying away from anything to do with the industry, which is very strange at the moment anyway, because you've got what's happening in the US. Like, they're going full force into this. Europe is opening up as well because you've got Mika, you've got like BlackRock just announced they're going to be launching ETPs there. So now everyone's looking at the UK and waiting for something to happen and for the FCA to loosen up their stance.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, the UK is like in the middle, like in the middle between like the West and East, you know, like it's between Europe and it's between the US, you know,
Yeah,
that's like,
we are a actually, I don't know if I can say we are a financial powerhouse. It doesn't feel like we are. We should be.
yeah,
And this is, unfortunately, this combined with certain political moves that have happened is actually driving a lot of people out of the country, a lot of businesses out of the country. I'm seeing an outflow of people leaving, which is really, really sad when I don't want to leave. I want
no,
to actually continue to live here, um, bring up a family here. So yeah, that's why like I'm not leaving, and like I fight so hard on educating people around what Bitcoin is, and actually like politicians as well. Like, there's a lot of education to be
Yeah.
done. But yeah, when it comes to the FCA, it's a very, very much uphill battle. We don't deal with them directly because we are not a financial services
Hmm.
company, but we deal with a lot of financial institutions and services. So we hear this through them, and I just want to pick up on the point that the people in the UK can't get access to a Bitcoin ETF, and this is a big problem. Currently,
They can't.
profession we can't get access.
Oh
We're
wow.
not allowed to. So retail are not allowed to. Professional investors are allowed to.
Okay.
This is a huge talking point in the UK at the moment, because there is a ban on retail investors getting access. So you will notice in the UK, you don't have the numbers for it, or we don't have numbers for it, but I would imagine the amount of people that hold MicroStrategy stock in the UK per population is significantly higher than anywhere else, because that's the only way that we can get access to Bitcoin indirectly, as a proxy, because we can't get access to these ETFs. Now, why would you do that? Is because you can get it under a tax wrapper,
Yeah.
and you're putting into a pension, you're doing whatever you are with it, and that's important because that's where a lot of individuals' wealth is stored. They're storing it for the future. So yeah, that's one thing that's a huge talking point at the moment, and that's what the FCA are getting pushed on, is why are we not allowed to access these?
Okay. Yeah, well, it's always a challenge, especially if you have a country which doesn't. I mean, Germany, for example, if you own Bitcoin, you had to hold it like for at least a year until you were allowed to use it. And if you would use it before, the German government would basically seize your Bitcoin, right? And it's always hard to deal with Bitcoin or buying Bitcoin if you have a country which is like which claims it's which says that it's illegal or for criminals, which is actually
Mm-hmm.
not. I mean, everyone knows that by now. But for you then, what were the challenges with getting Bitcoin to people or explaining Bitcoin to people, especially, as Jordan, the founder of the Bitcoin Collective, how were people like reacting when you shared the story of Bitcoin, or when you tried to show them, like, let's say, I mean, I'm a big fan of games where you can earn sats. I mean, I play like so many games where you can earn sats. And how were people like, what was the reaction when they heard you talking about Bitcoin, which is known to be for criminals or thieves or whatever, So, well, it's actually funny that now, like, a few governments are adapting Bitcoin, which makes the government criminals, but in a sense, because that's the argument, right? Bitcoin is for criminals, but then the government adapts it. But anyway, um, yeah, reaction of the people when you show them Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's been funny. I did a talk on this in and it'll resonate with yourself and a lot of your listeners as well. I did a talk called "Crazy is a Numbers Game" in a Bulgarian Bitcoin conference,
Mhm.
and it was all around the idea that you're seen as being quite crazy, the crazy one, when it's just you shouting this message, and or maybe a small group of you shouting this message around, let's say, Bitcoin, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Um, and you're seen as being the crazy one, but whereas if you have the numbers behind you, you have a mass population of you all saying this is a great idea, then it becomes normal and into the status quo. So I still feel like we're in that crazy camp of there's
Yeah,
a small group of Bitcoiners globally, actually, um, all saying the system is broken. We need to fix the underlying problem before anything else. And that underlying problem is that money runs the world and it's built on fiat system at the moment. Um, And so talking about like, yeah, crazy being a numbers game, I really like to frame it that way because if you tell it through a story, like there's multiple different scenarios that this has happened in history. And this is me like going back in history as well as like you have Galileo who said that the earth revolves around the sun. The church were like, no, no, you're wrong. And put him in prison. And then you've got this guy called Ignaz Semmelweis, who was a doctor in the, I want to say, 19th century.
Yeah, 19th
And,
century.
and he was shouting that, doctors and people in hospitals should be cleaning their hands with
Yeah.
chlorine, to stop germs. But this was kind of before germs were really a thing. Or they'd been discovered anyway. They were always a thing. And, yeah, he went to the medical establishment and he said that doctors should be washing their hands with chlorine. And he showed them facts that he's been doing this in the hospital he works in. I think it was in Vienna.
Mm.
And it was, the deaths had dropped by about 90 to 95%. The medical establishment just boohooed it and said, no, doctors are not the ones that are killing these patients. And he fought this. He really did fight it back and was like, you guys, you're wrong. Like, you need to implement this, like worldwide. And eventually he got fired. He got put into a psychiatric ward and he died, I think, say within a year of being in there. But now he is classed as the savior of mothers. He has statues in 3 different hospitals around the world, as a pioneer for this.
Mm.
And that's how I kind of see Bitcoiners and Bitcoin is we're at that funny phase of we've been seen as being really crazy. Now we're slightly being accepted, but not quite yet. But in 20, 30, 40 years' time, we'll
We
be
will. Yeah.
seen as the ones that actually push this forward and were correct in the end.
It's kind of like, Florence Pugh, I think. That was a British woman which went to Crimea back then when the UK went to Crimea for some reason. Don't ask me why. And she was like the one who discovered that she also had like washing her hands, staying clean after every soldier that you just helped. Wash your hands, wash your face, wash your arms. And I mean, also people thought she was crazy, but now whenever I walk through London, I always see statues of her. And and I think the perfect example that she met with Galileo was that he was not a flat earther. He was a round earther, if I want to call him that.
Mm-hmm.
And back then you had like a centralized system which said, no, what we tell you is the truth and what you're saying is false. And currently it's like that with Bitcoin. Like you have certain institutions which tell you, no, Bitcoin's for criminals, while you're actually saying, no, it's not, because just look how many regular people, which were poor, are now getting on a good track thanks to Bitcoin, right? I mean, look at El Salvador, for example. And I have friends which still believe that it's like that Bitcoin is for criminals. Just kick my microphone. But that Bitcoin is for criminals. And I'm like, no, it's not. I own Bitcoin. I'm not a criminal. You know me. And they're like, yeah, well, that's different. But sometimes I just
It's
want to.
I
Right.
feel your pain. It's very difficult. Yeah, when someone doesn't quite understand it because it's hard, like pushing it on them. Like I've been through. I think every Bitcoiner has really been through that phase of when you
Yeah.
first find it and you're like, this thing's amazing. You need to scream and shout it to everyone. And maybe you're not doing it in
Good way.
the most strategic way, and not meeting them where they are. And then I've had this with so many friends. It's like you come across as a really, really weird, weird person that thinks that like everything's wrong. And you're in the pub and you'll be speaking about Bitcoin and they'll be like, oh, shut up. You just think it's really important, but I think most people go through that um that phase, but I just want to your original question was like how do I think it was around like how do I communicate it,
Yeah.
and this is where I find that entrepreneurs, people that own businesses or running businesses understand how businesses operate. They're the critical thinkers, and they're the people that will be way more open to
Mm,
actually an idea that the status quo will change, and maybe the current way of thinking isn't the correct way for the future anyway. And this has been a big light bulb moment, I guess, is these people are way more likely to understand Bitcoin
mm,
than the people that are maybe just like going about their day to day life on
yeah.
the in the rat race. And because it's hard, like struggling to make ends meet, and then you're saying that you should be learning about this thing. Maybe they don't have time to actually learn about
Mm.
because it takes a lot of time to learn about Bitcoin. And then you're also saying, oh, maybe you should be looking at, well, once you've learned about it, then you'll want to allocate money to it. And that's difficult for a lot of people to actually have that capability to do it.
I mean, also, we in Europe call it bread jobs. If you have a bread job, so which is basically a job that you really do because you have to pay for your rent, you have to pay for your family, you have to make a living, right? Those people are like, fuck, they can't even, or don't even have time for Bitcoin. And I noticed it like a lot of times at conferences, like BTC Prague, for example, was the perfect one. I saw so many hedge funds and bankers and entrepreneurs or people with their own businesses. And when I talk to them, I will turn 20 this year in April. And I was like a 19-year-old, 18-year-old kid going to them and talking about finance. And you don't see that every day, that a kid talks to an adult, an experienced adult, which has been like the sector for like, I don't know, 20 years, talking about Bitcoin and finance. And I was just sitting there discussing Bitcoin with those people. I'm like, well, how can I talk to them about this easily, but not about people my age or my friends? And as you just said, they don't have time. They're focused on their daily lives. They focus on the rat race, go to work, work a 9 to 5 job. I don't know, pay your rent, pay your pensions and live off the pension. It's horrible. Just And if people would just take like 5 minutes, I think it would change. But even those 5 minutes aren't enough in a sense, as you just said, because Bitcoin requires like a lot of time. And it's kind of sad when you think of it, it's
Yeah. Uh, but there is, it's really cool that like, Bitcoin brings so many different generations together.
mm,
For like, and you can talk to someone, um, that is two generations ahead of you. Um, or it's quite insane to actually think that this one thing actually brings people together, from different experiences, and you can have conversations with experienced financial people. But the nice thing is that they've obviously gone through the system of
yeah,
this is what I thought was correct, and now this is actually what I think now, because I've found Bitcoin. And for the younger generation, it's also we're not educated around this. For me, anyway, growing up, I didn't have much financial education, in school or anything like that. Um, my parents, for example, weren't big into investing, so I didn't learn it from them. And I think the boomer generation,
boomer
aren't
generation, boomer
aren't
generation. I'm part of that. Fuck me. Oh, sorry. Continue. Oh fuck.
what generation are you?
I'm '05, so I was born 2005. So that was would that be like generation Z? I'm not sure. I
I
mean,
don't know.
uh,
I've lost count of,
it
I've
doesn't matter.
lost where
I'm
we
just
are.
part of the boomer generation then, I guess. That's a nice way to put it. Okay. But yeah, continue.
um,
Oh,
I can't even remember what I was.
Oh, fuck.
Moral of the story
Moral
is
story,
that
yeah.
older generations, it was a lot easier for them. It was you buy a house, you have a job, um, and you can live life very well, very nicely. And it
Mm,
was easier to get on the property ladder because that was the main asset that people would be buying. Um, Whereas it's very different now for different
yeah.
generations, and people need to understand that the only constant in life is change. And a lot of people can't change and they're just comfortable in the
Yeah.
status quo, how life is. And this is why, like, a business example is like Blockbuster. They didn't innovate. It's the typical one, but it's like they didn't innovate, so they're not here anymore.
Mm.
You have to keep innovating, changing, evolving. And that's what we're seeing Bitcoin do to the financial world, but also it actually just permeates so many um, different areas as well.
Just the word that you mentioned, innovation. I mean, look how far we have come as a human race. We once walked the moon, and now look at us now. I mean, you know, it's kind of. I think somehow we evolved, but at the same time, we also went backwards when it comes to finance, when it comes to politics. I mean, for me personally, 50 years ago, the politicians were totally different than the ones we have today. And when you look at on Apple TV or Paramount Plus, I think there's this series called Billions. I'm not sure if you have seen it. It's
I've,
like
yeah, I've seen one or two episodes.
yeah,
Uh,
and there I watched the whole season. Like I watched season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4 until like season 7. And throughout the whole seasons, so it's basically about the hedge fund, which has like a company where he has like traders and everything, and they make money off like various things, right? And how hedge funds are sometimes they also are not breaking laws, but they are misusing certain laws and also like on the edge of breaking them. And when I looked at that series, I was like, fuck me. Each season just got much more out of control than it like used to be before. And in each season, each episode, the main character, Bobby Axelrod is his name. He always got innovative. He always took it to like a next level. And I was telling my mom like, Mom, he's gonna do this, that, and that. And my mom, as an ex-banker, she knew how the world runs, how the finance world runs, and she was like, "Yeah, he's gonna do that. You got it right." And next episode, that happened. All what we predicted, right? And just the word innovation. When you think of Bitcoin is a new form of money because, and to be honest with you, it wasn't always perfect. It always got adapted to be better, right? And which then also brings me to like privacy and which we will discuss like in a few minutes. But just the fact that you said innovation, I mean,
mhm.
just note that word. That's like beautiful because it rhymes with Bitcoin, right? And
We have to keep innovating, and I think you're right. We have slowed down potentially over the last 50 years.
mm,
Um, but now it's insane the amount of innovation that we're seeing. Is like I always say, with like technology advancing, with AI, with Bitcoin, it's like the
yeah,
convergence of all these technologies coming together. Um, and it's such a beautiful thing to live through. And I'm a strong believer that we're going to see 100 years of change in the next 10 years, just
mm,
because we've reached that point. Um, it's so fast how let's use AI for example, because you can actually see how fast that's moving. Is like 1 year ago, if you look at the videos it was producing, they were
yeah,
awful. And if you look at what it can do now, it's
yeah,
incredible what it can do. Think, what's that going to do in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? A good argument that I have quite a lot with one of my friends is I'm forever the optimist. Um, And I look very positively towards like, the future's going to be great. Of course you need to, there's going to be some challenges along the way,
Yeah, like
but
war.
yeah. But focusing on that, I don't think people should. Like, you need to focus on what the great things, the cool things that are happening in the world. Because there's so many, and like, I'm very happy to be living through this period, even though it's a period of the fourth turning, the destruction, but we get to live through that and the reset as well, which is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. But anyway, back to the story about me and my friend. We have this argument of, I'm like, I always say I don't think we're going to be using planes. This is going off on a tangent a little bit, but we're not going to be using planes as much as we do currently. And I believe rockets are going to take over that. And
Yeah.
he's always like, no, it's not going to happen. Because like, he is from Australia. I was like, you're going to be able to get to Australia in an hour. And this is what I believe. And he's like, no, it's not going to happen. It's not feasible. It's not, like, you can't do this, that, and the other. You can't possibly go at 27,000 kilometers an hour. And this is where I'm like, no, but you can. We've just not done, like, we've not really done earth to earth travel before. But this just makes logical sense, is if you can, say rockets turn into commercial earth to earth transportation, it makes logical sense that you fly up into lower orbit, and then you can travel at 27,000 kilometers an hour around, and you can be in Australia in less than an hour. And that is including the takeoff and landing. But I really struggle to think how a more pessimistic mind works, because I'm like, this is going to happen. And then if you look at SpaceX and
Yeah. Example.
Jeff Booth, not Jeff Booth, Jeff Bezos's company, I can't remember the name of it.
Blue
Oh,
Origin. Blue Origin,
yeah, that's
something
it.
like that. Yeah.
They're already looking into how this actually happens and how this. So innovation, you have to be innovative, and anything that you can really imagine, like, it could technically come true. Because say 100 years ago, 150 years ago, nobody would have been like, well, it would have been an imagination of people. Is like, imagine if I could communicate with someone on the other side of the world. Imagine if I had friends on the other side of the world and I could
Yeah.
talk to them through a device, something. Yeah. And it's not like there's a string going around the world and you've got a cup. It's like you're talking to them, and nobody would think that, because there's so many steps in between that. We needed the internet. We needed smartphones. We needed this, that, and the other. But there's so many different pieces in that journey.
And remember what they said about the internet. It's never going to be a thing. It's never going to be big. And now look where it is now. I mean, and what are we saying about Bitcoin? It's never going to be big. It's never going to be adapted. And look now, like at Texas, which is basically like the mining industry there. Like look at the US in general. Like each state tries to adopt like a Bitcoin reserve, right? And 10 years ago, like, or 5 years ago, they all said like, Bitcoin's never going to be a thing. And but look, like where we are now, like we're at like a point where like globally it can be adapted if, of course, we have the politicians which want to, or I don't know, the finance sector if they want to. But in my personal belief, if BlackRock or all these companies adapt it, then in a sense we have already won, because globally then it will be even adapted more. But let's go to something really interesting now, and which, by the way, concerns me, because I saw a post a couple of days ago. That was also the reason why I asked you if you want to join my pod and talk about that. We just mainly talked about like for half an hour about other stuff, but that's fine. Um, the UK just passed a law, or actually, I wouldn't say passed a law, but forced a law on Apple where they have to share data with the government. And would you just briefly like
Yeah.
to share on that, because what happened there and how everything works? Because I think that's really concerning, especially when it comes to
It's,
privacy.
yeah, it is concerning that, so the UK have been pushing Apple essentially to lower the security of their iCloud. So the end-to-end encryption and make a backdoor is what they want to do. We've had discussions like this in the past of like Signal, the messaging app. They they were getting pressure as well. I want to say maybe a year and a half ago.
Mm.
And their CEO came out and said she was very strict about it. She was like, "We are not creating a backdoor. If you're going to push us to do this, we will just leave the UK."
Yeah,
And this is similar pressure which Apple have had, but they've given in to it. And what it does is it allows the UK government to, if they've got a warrant, to essentially go into someone's iCloud. And by creating this backdoor, which wasn't there previously, I need to state, because even Apple can't see your data, or they can't see it inside. But now with this, if there's a warrant from the UK government, then they will be able to get access to it. If it keeps progressing the way it's looking like it's going. So that's one worry from your privacy,
mm,
and the government having access to all of that data that you've got on there. And I just want to shout out, do not leave your seed phrases on Apple Notes.
yeah.
This was like a big worry. I was like, there will be a lot of people out there with their seed phrases on Apple Notes. Get it off
and
there.
and don't take a picture and upload it on iCloud if
Exactly. So yeah, never keep it electronically. But um, the other thing is the attack vector from, because
yeah,
if there is a door there, then it's open to malicious activity of
yeah,
someone being able to hack it and get in. And Apple came out and said they were very, very disappointed that it had come to this. And I posted around this, and I put a post out on X, on LinkedIn, um, saying it's a dark day for the UK essentially.
mhm,
And wow, they just blew up. I've never had. So I post on LinkedIn because like that's my way of getting out of the Bitcoin echo chamber and really, trying to subtly get the Bitcoin message in there. Uh, but yeah, my LinkedIn post just went super viral. And the amount of comments in there, a lot supporting it, but also the worrying thing a lot was like, if you've got nothing to hide,
yeah.
then you'll be fine with it. And that messaging, like, I don't entertain it. On LinkedIn, I don't entertain a lot of the comments, because it's just people wanting a fight. But I was just surprised by how many commented that. And like that was their view on the world. And they were happy for this to happen. And yeah, it's quite a scary thing. And I've seen a lot of people like comparing it and saying, would you be happy to just leave your front door open and anyone can walk
Yeah.
through? And and the same with like if you open your curtains, everyone can just see into your home whilst you're living your life. Um, Nobody really wants that. So
Or or
it's
if
just,
or if you have like a child which is like naked in the bathtub, would you like to leave the window open so everyone can see through the bathtub, or in the bathtub or in the bathroom in general? Like it's the same thing, right?
yeah. And it just opened a privacy debate in the UK. And it has like, this will be ongoing for a while. And will it get reversed? I don't know. Um, but it's very shocking that it came to this. Um, because I don't actually know if any other government has done this and pressed Apple like this to get access. Um, I'll need to look into if this has actually happened with Apple before.
I mean, I guess not directly, but indirectly, I want to point out at the NSA what they did with, Edward Snowden and this whole story,
Mm-hmm.
how basically the Obama administration spied on like millions of people for safety reasons or for the protection of the world or the people. And I mean, I would say indirectly, yes, but maybe directly not. Like, let's say openly, like where you've seen it like on the news, like they just did with the UK. But I mean, privacy is a given law, and as you said, I don't leave my front door open so everyone can walk in. Why should I do it on my phone? And the argument, if you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't be worried. I'm like, well, everyone has a secret. Everyone has something to hide. It's not like, I mean, we humans, we aren't perfect. We I mean, I don't know if I'm making a stupid example, but if I have a dick picture of my dick and I upload that on iCloud, I don't want people to see it. Not that I have one, by the way, but just as an example, I mean, who would want to see that? And then the argument, you have nothing to hide, so you shouldn't be worried. I'm like, that's a stupid argument, man. And
Yeah, it
it
it comes back to um, should someone be over? It's the whole should someone be overlooking the whole country and citizens and everything like that? Because if you're putting it in terms of data, we're talking here is like that's essentially giving the government access to everything. But then also in terms of our money as well, like we're having a big privacy debate and worry with like central bank digital currencies as well on
yeah,
that side of things, because that's a huge thing. Because if you, there is then control and overwatch of your communication, but then also your value as well, like how you're transferring value um, in terms of money. That's not a world I want to live in anyway. Um,
yeah,
so I'm glad there's a lot of people that understand the privacy world a lot better than me, and are fighting back on that. And my expertise is more on the how can we fight back on the money side of things.
yeah,
Because unfortunately, like the US have said that there's going to be no CBDCs from their side anyway. But then the UK, the same week that the US announced that, the UK set up a central bank digital currency hub, I think it was called.
yeah.
And it was the complete opposite. So we're still looking into that and going down that route. And the guys at Bitcoin Policy UK are doing a phenomenal job on fighting back on that. Um, but it's scary, to think what could happen. But I think always it, Bitcoin and freedom of privacy and all of that, it will win eventually.
Mhm.
Um, but it's at the moment in the UK, it looks like it's going to be a rocky road to actually get there.
Yeah, and I mean, when you also look at other countries like Israel, I mean, Efrat Effingsson, sorry, gosh, I don't remember her last name, just Efrat, from Your Device podcast, she shared this like on a post on Twitter, like
Ah,
where Israel, the state of Israel, literally just published like a CBDC and is working on a CBDC, and just like the ECB, like in Europe, and just like the UK now. And for me, a CBDC is a social credit system like they have in China because it goes in that direction. I mean, in China, you have like a credit score system where if you say something against the state, they reduce you have like points or like a score and that is going to be reduced. And then if you have a certain level, which let's say it's like a few thousand points, you can't access like groceries, you can't buy like flights out of China, that's, in my opinion, is a digital communistic regime. And I always talk about that a lot on this podcast. like how socialism and communism have never worked, and they will never work, because everyone who tells you I'm anti-capitalism and pro-communism is actually anti-other capitalists and pro-capitalism for himself, And
Yeah. I, I think with all of this, we now have, obviously, bring it back to Bitcoin, and we now have a tool that
mm,
can separate money and state. And I think that
yeah,
on a simple level, that's all that we really need to think about, because all of these problems are above this and are caused by governments having control, like mass amounts of control over the money. Um, and by separating this and giving more of that power back to the citizens, to the people, the government becomes a lot smaller, and these issues also become a lot smaller.
mm,
So I think, for a lot of people, it's more concentrating on the foundations of, like, we have this tool, Bitcoin, now, which is like, I always like to think, what would I do with, where would I be, where would we be without it? Um,
it's
and
perfect. It's perfect to be in, right. But right now we need it. It's just perfect for this situation, right? So,
yeah, and but I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I probably wouldn't be in finance in general. I don't know. Um, but because it teaches you how the actual system works. Uh, but yeah, a lot of this, the moral of the story is, a lot of this actually just stems right back to the separate money and state. That's
mm,
what we need to do to then defund or reduce government, which government also needs to reduce its spending. I'm a big believer in that. Uh, but yeah, it does. I'm trying. You can always pick out lots of different bits that are happening in society and what's going wrong, um, what's the problem. But actually, when you actually stem it all back, it is having control of that money. Um, and Bitcoin fits in there perfectly. It's like it can separate money and state in a sly roundabout way, if you want to put it like that.
and
So yeah,
yeah, and Bitcoin is
yeah,
also perfect when it comes to privacy, like certain laws that we have as as the Bitcoin community has. Like if you have a seed trace, no pictures, no what did you say before, Apple Note or something? Like piece of paper,
yeah.
analog, and stored somewhere safe, like in a safe place, or like in a bookshelf or whatever, or I don't know, in your nightstand, like beside your bed. Like that's perfect, and we need that. We need that analog decentralized system. I mean, because there's a reason why we used to be, I would say, mostly analog, and nowadays with this whole technology thing, like with the camera, with the microphone, with the MacBook Pro that you have, or I don't know, um, we're not that analog anymore, because they can always track you with something that you have on your body, which is electronic, right?
Mm-hmm.
With
This,
Bitcoin,
this, yeah, I knew.
we kind of don't have that anymore. We have a analog system again, or a decentralized system, a system that is outside of decentralized institutions or state or whatever, So that's
Yeah,
pretty cool too, you know.
I guess it's similar to how Bitcoin's designed, as it's digital, but why it works is because it has a physical element. You've got the Bitcoin
Yeah,
mining; it's attached to the physical world. So when you're applying that to the seed phrase, essentially, making that analog, but at the same time, there's multiple tools of multi-sig and everything now,
yeah,
but it will also take a long time. I'm someone that likes to meet people in the middle. I realize that Joe Bloggs off the street isn't ready to go from like no responsibility over their money, over their wealth. They've got it in the bank. They're fairly happy with it, to full responsibility. Like, people can't make that jump. Like, that's a huge jump, and that's a jump that's done over decades. It's not a going from 0 to 100. So that's why, like, I don't, because I'm a big proponent of like self-custody and having your own Bitcoin, but that's why I see the importance of, at this phase, of like having an ETF, having institutions, because it does bridge that gap very nicely for a lot of people, because that's a world that they also understand, is thinking that, like, a lot of people don't understand the Bitcoin world. But a lot of people understand how their pensions set up, and stocks and shares ISAs and this, that, and the other. It gives them a layer of security as well, whilst getting exposure to this thing that they're still learning about. Because, as we said at the start, learning takes a long time and everyone's still learning as well. Like, we're both learning about Bitcoin. It's a never-ending journey.
There's always something new. As we said, innovation before. I mean, Bitcoin, I mean, there wasn't Lightning from the beginning with. I mean, that all came later, you know? I mean, the white paper, like, I mean, that was published like immediately on the first day, but even, I mean, I had some friends who are really into coding. You know, they analyzed the coding of Bitcoin, and they said it wasn't perfect at the beginning, but it got adapted by each year and each session, you know? And
yeah, it's like capabilities have just come around. So I think I might be off here, but 2018 Lightning came on the scene.
Yeah.
And then I want to say 2022 we had the Taproot upgrade, maybe 2021. And now that's allowed like a whole new area of innovation of like having contracts, then stable coins coming onto Bitcoin, as you saw Tether happening. And like, there's so many different things. And this is what I'm talking about. Of like, when you're thinking about 10 years down the line, it's hard to actually think about that, because so many little pieces actually haven't happened yet. And it's the same with Bitcoin's origin. Is Bitcoin, Satoshi's not just this person who thought up all of this and was like, wow, like, I'm a genius, and like, this is all just come out of my brain. And it's actually built on work of people previously attempting this, but then the one that Satoshi released was maybe the right time to do it, because all those pieces had come together and they managed to put the pieces of the jigsaw in the right places. And yeah, it's just a beautiful thing watching the evolution of Bitcoin, but then the evolution of like how we are progressing as well.
And of the boomer generation, of course. Of the boomer generation. So, with that, people, I think that's a perfect end statement to the end of the episode. But before we're going to do that, Jordan, do you have, or does the Bitcoin Collective have any social media where people can find you and interact with you? And what are your next upcoming events, if you have some plans? Would you like to share that briefly?
Yeah, sure. If you want to find us, probably the best way is through our podcast, The Bitcoin Collective, or through a newsletter, which is on thebitcoincollective.co. So yeah, you can go and check out all of that. We put a weekly Friday email that just summarizes the news from the week in 4 minutes, in just a no BS way of doing it. I was very sick of trudging through X all week and like trying to figure out what was signal, what was noise. And now we just put it all into one email, and it's just like, here's the signal, take it. And then you can follow me on X or on LinkedIn. I'm just Jordan Walker. And events, we haven't announced them yet. So follow one of our social pages, and there will be an event coming up in the next, over summer. So you can keep eyes on what's going to happen.
Okay, cool. So yeah, dear people, that was another episode of Noma Podcast. I really enjoyed that one. That was like probably one of my favorites one, because I had like so many people already, and personally for me, that was my favorite one. So thank you, Jordan, for joining
Thank
me
you.
today. And dear people, that was it. I hope you have a lovely day, Jordan, and hopefully see you at the next meetup or conference that you guys. Uh, oh, now I forgot the word. Oh, fuck. Now I forgot the word that you guys organized. Organized was the word. So, Jordan, see you soon. Bye.
See you soon. Thank you for having me.
Nomad Podcast.